Who should Tennessee count on? Because there are going to have to be a lot of players step up to replace a whole lot of production. A whole lot of production. We start talking about guys that are going to be in pro day, you're talking about Tennessee's best defensive player in Byron Young. You're talking about Tennessee's most productive player on offense, and that is Jalen Hyatt. You're talking about their most productive offensive player, Hendon Hooker. You're talking about their best offensive lineman in Darnell Wright, and it ain't close. So Tennessee has a ton of production to replace. That's something that Athlon touched base on recently. So, as far as production in the SEC, returning offensive production, Tennessee 57%, returning defensive production, Tennessee 69%. So, really more defensive production than a lot of people might think by using Byron Young, but the offensive production at 57 tells you that Tennessee is truly a running football team. As crazy as that sounds. So you start including Jalen Wright, and you start including Jabari Small and other guys that they've had. Ramel Keaton at receiver, but mostly I think it's talking about the running game. Um, Tennessee is at 57% is pretty remarkable considering they lose the Blitnikoff winner and a guy that would have been a Heisman Trophy finalist had he not gotten hurt.
Yes, the concern for Tennessee is there's good losing talent and there's bad losing talent, if that makes sense, because the two teams below them, Texas A&M and
what do you mean by that?
Sometimes we in the media, when we project college football teams before a year, we overvalue returning talent or undervalue lost talent. Below Tennessee are Texas A&M and Vanderbilt. They are the two that return less production than Tennessee. Well, if you're Texas A&M, you're probably glad you don't return a lot of talent because you were horrible last year. This is the addition by subtraction. Classic example of this, Dave. When Tennessee lost Michael Munoz, many who covered the team didn't really care because we all knew Aaron Sears was better.
Oh, yeah.
And
yeah. No, I mean, I respect Michael Munoz. I think he's a great individual. I think he had chronically bad knees when he showed up to Tennessee, and we have no idea what he would have been, but I still think he was overrated because of his dad's last name. So some of the other schools that do have returning talent, let's start with the offensive side. Ole Miss, LSU would be number one at 81%. That's a little bit scary, I think, for the West because that was a team that was really disheveled to begin the season and put it all together. So
that's on offense, 81%, but yeah.
Oh, did I say defense? Sorry, offense. So that's 81%. Ole Miss, 80%. And then after that, you have Missouri returning offensive production at 77%. Vanderbilt, 73%. Go ahead and chuck them out because they're both horrible. So really, I think the one that stands out most to me, well, I'm going to say two. I think the one that stands out most to me on the offensive side would be LSU returning 81%, which is not the highest. That's A&M, as you mentioned. But LSU had a good season. You know, they played for an SEC title. So returning 81%, I think is scary for the SEC West. The other one that stands out to me, and most years I would say it doesn't matter. It's Nick Saban. It's everything's fine. They'll have plug and play guys like this Mechie guy, and they'll be just fine. Don't worry about it. But Alabama with 43% returning offensive production, including Bryce Young, who I think was the best player last year in college football. He got my Heisman vote. That's troublesome if I'm an Alabama fan because I don't know who my quarterback is for sure. And I didn't think their guys were particularly great at the skill positions last year, so nobody benched them. That's not the usual Alabama send a ton of guys to the NFL and there's a ton of great guys behind them. That 43%, if I'm Alabama fan, is disconcerting to say the least.
Are you ready for this, Dave? You ready for this from me? Another Caleb Calhoun build up.
I'm born ready.
Alabama fans, don't worry. Your program's not about to take a step back. Nick Saban is still Nick Saban. However, 2023 is going to be a rebuilding year. It's going to be the first rebuilding year y'all have had since 2010. And
I agree with that. Two different. Yeah, no, I agree with that. Yeah. Two coordinators, two new coordinators. Hey, and as far as what you said, they've already taken a step back.
Yeah, they have. And so I think they'll be back. I think they'll win another national championship in not in 2024 because Tennessee's winning it then, but they'll win it in 2025. They'll win another couple here in the near future. Nick Saban, he's been on a tear on the recruiting trail, so they're loading up on talent again. He's retooling the roster, but Bryce Young and Will Anderson were the only reason they weren't 8-4 last year. Let's call it what it is. And both are gone now, and so Bryce Young's the only reason Tennessee didn't beat Alabama 52-20 instead of 52-49.
I agree. and Alabama, the lowest in the SEC in returning defensive production at 38%, which is pretty much a wowzer. And nobody else is even in the 40s except for Mississippi State. Everybody's 50 or above at 43% is Mississippi State, but 38% returning defensive production, losing your two most talented players and Will Anderson and losing Bryce Young. Yeah, man, I think that's big time. I want to break down Tennessee's opponents and the production or lack thereof that they'll have returning in 2023. And it's brought to you by Andy Mason, AndyMasonRealEstate.com. AndyMasonRealEstate.com has over 40 years of experience in the Knoxville area. It will save you thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars. They're awesome. AndyMasonRealEstate.com. That office will take care of you. Best service, best prices, pretty simple. How about that? So as far as the teams that Tennessee will face this year, returning offensive production for Alabama and defensive production, 43 and 38% respectively, as we mentioned. Florida, 55 and 53 offensive and defensive production returning respectively. Georgia, 52% on offense and 70% on defense, which is pretty scary. This one surprised me a little bit. Returning offensive production from Kentucky, who had their running back, his name escapes me right now, suspended for the first part of the season at 71%, and they lose Will Levis, who was beat up, but still you would have thought he would have had more production. They returned 71%. And then you have Kentucky 55% on the defensive side. I mentioned LSU earlier, which is a whopping 81% of returning offensive production. It blows me away. 60% on the defensive side. As at Texas A&M, you mentioned them. They return combined the most production of any team in the SEC, but it ain't great. 82% and 77%.
Question before you go further. Do you think Texas A&M – here's a real question, because we're all hard on Jimbo Fisher, myself included, and what he said yesterday is more recent. Do you think Texas A&M is doing what we're doing, or do you think it's possible Texas A&M last year was 1988 Tennessee? Remember 1988 starts 0-6. Everybody's down on Johnny Majors. Finished 5-6. He retools the staff. Pretty much fires everybody. Brings in Fulmer and Doug Matthews as offensive and defensive coordinators. Turns it around. Goes 11-1 the next year because so much talent returned.
Yeah, I can see that comparison. Yeah, I could definitely see that comparison. And by the way, guys, I apologize again. We've finally got our message board working, so I'm gonna play a little bit of catch up here in a second because I don't want to disrespect you guys. I really appreciate you being on. So, why do you see the comparison?
Well, because both teams had losing records those years, 88 and 2022, and the coaches were on really hot seats. I mean, I wasn't around. I was 0 years old, but just born when it happened with Majors. But I've read old articles, and it sounded like the fans, that was the year they wanted Majors gone, was 1988. Everybody was ready for him to be gone then. He had to retool the staff, just like Jimbo Fisher did. And the team returned a ton of talent in 1989 and had still what I think maybe one of the biggest turnarounds in college football history to go from 5-6 to 11-1. And by the way, started 0-6 on top of that. And so Texas A&M, I didn't think about it until I just saw this returning production. And I'm still with you. I think what we believe is still more likely. But there's some parallels where Jimbo Fisher hired a new offensive coordinator. He returns a lot of talent. Everybody's really down on the dude right now, even though he seemed like a home run hire at the time, just like Johnny Major seemed like a home run hire when Tennessee brought him in 77. So I'm seeing some weird parallels, funny enough, even though.
I could see that.
So you could see it too. So you could see Texas A&M have like a historic turnaround next year. And
a historic turnaround? No, I could see them going down. Now, I don't think they can have a historic turnaround. I think that
like they do what Tennessee did in 89.
No. I mean, I don't know any reason to believe that they could. And I mean, Bobby Petrino's dated, and you've got, to me, this feels exactly like the 08 season with Tennessee. Is that you tried to go out and hire a guy who has a good offensive pedigree, but really you're an offensive coach, talking about Philip Fulmer and Dave Clawson, and you're going to look over his shoulder the second something goes wrong. I don't see. Why do you see an instant turnaround?
No, I just thought about it when I said it. It's the parallels. Texas A&M was 5-7. They have a head coach who was a home run hire who everybody now thinks is going to be fired. He hired a new offensive coordinator, and then they're going into next year. It just reminded me of Tennessee in 88 and 89. Tennessee thought they had a home run hire in Majors, and they wanted him fired after 88 with 5-6. He hired a new offensive coordinator, then Philip Fulmer. Now you're right. The difference is Petrino is an older coordinator.
He had a new defensive coordinator too.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Because Ken Donahue was the guy, right? For years.
Yes, and they ran a 3-4. So mid-season, they switched from a 3-4 to a 4-3, which nowadays would be unheard of.
Right. They got better when they made that switch.
Well, they did. But nowadays, you wouldn't have even considered it. It would have been bizarro. So let me get to some posts on the message board. I promise I haven't been ignoring you guys. Our software is not working correctly, but it always does, which is weird. Elias says Oklahoma may be in for the full Missouri experience. I agree with that, if that means they're really, really bad. Going back to the Pate ranking that had Tennessee not in the top 10, I don't see Notre Dame at 6, according to SC Scout Guy. South Carolina played even with him in that bowl game. We were starting 4 walk-on players, and that's coming from a South Carolina perspective. Totally agree with you. Travis says state of our program is top 5. I agree. And Travis says LSU's top 10. Caleb's got him number 1. And
LSU top 10, that's so understating how good of a job LSU is.
It's definitely top 5. I would have to really sit down and think.
Still understating it.
Maybe. The and then some other posts just concerning state of the program that bothered some people. Utah is an awkward one to me, so consistent, but it's the Pac-12, which is a mess. Very true. I mean, how do you even really judge Utah because they're in the Pac-12? And that, to me, makes it incredibly difficult. A shout-out to Juan Ward. We always love shout-outs to Juan Ward. And, a lot of people tend to agree with the fact that Tennessee should definitely be in the top 10. I don't even get why they're not, to be real honest with you. So apologize for all those that we've ignored. I think we got a new poster on board. We appreciate that. Cal A says, Tobias, Calvin, do you think Heupel, I'm going to say that's for Calhoun, will go in with the same game plan? Milton is in his 3rd season, something Hendon didn't. Heupel, same game plan for this year. I think there will be some adjustments. I think you'll see Tennessee throw over the middle a lot more with slants, little dig routes, because that suits Joe Milton. And, I wonder if they have the option to do some other things.
Let's put it this way.
The option to do other things.
Hendon Hooker averaged about little under 10 carries a game. Joe Milton, I don't think they're going to be afraid to have him carry the ball 15 times a game, 15, 16 times a game because of his size, because he's so physically gifted. You might have I'm just going to project here. You might have an up the middle Wildcat formation every now and then. Just why give it to a power back? Why not just have Joe Milton snap it and run forward for a touchdown like they did with AJ Johnson back in the day?
I love the package. Here's the package. The Joe and Go.
Joe and go. Joe go.
Yeah, see, if we start pushing that, that can be a thing. Because you remember Gerald Jones when he lined up at quarterback, it was called the G gun, right?
Oh, I forgot about yes. Cutcliffe started the Wildcat. You're right.
No, that was Clausen with the G gun.
No, it was in 2007 when Tennessee was playing when Tennessee played for the SEC title. Cutcliffe was doing that too.
No, that was 2008. I know because John Adams and I named it, and Dave Clausen used it at a press conference, and I don't think he'd care if I told the story now, but Philip Former pulled me aside after practice and said, "Where'd y'all get that G gun?" And I said, John Adams made it up, who was Philip's least favorite person in the world. And maybe expletive, and that was the end of that.
Oh, I know why he was so.
But when Clausen, I mean, when somebody takes your little nickname for their offense and uses it in a press conference, you can take all the Tennessee Sports Writing Awards and throw them in the trash can. That is a moment of glory.
Oh,
he used G-Gun that we came up with.
That's so funny. That is so funny. Now I'm seeing more. Look, Fulmer is way more PC about it. I've heard Ramon Foster. I can see why, if you were a Fulmer loyalist playing for Fulmer, why you have such strong anti-Dave Clausen feelings. Fulmer, to his credit, tries to stay a little classier about it. But
yes. More on Tennessee's football practice. Smoky Mountain Red says, I'm excited to see Cameron Sullivan at running back. I am too, but there's a part of me that wonders if they just needed depth there because they don't want to get the proven tailbacks banged up, and he's that guy. So I could see that going in one of two ways. I could see him being very good as a bigger tailback, or I could see Khalifa Keith showing up in the summer and that's his role, and then suddenly Selden doesn't really have a role. So I'm not saying that's the case. Nobody's told me that, but that's a possibility. And Tobias says, I'm really cheering for Hooker. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Is he referring to me or is he referring to Hendon?
Pretty sure Hendon, since we talked about Hendon Hooker.
Yeah, that's fair.
Oh, Dave, we got it.
Yes.
Sorry, before we go away from the returning talent, I want to know your thoughts on this because Tennessee visits Missouri this year. Okay, don't laugh. But Missouri is second in overall returning production to Texas A&M. They were, hold on, just hear me out. I'm
struggling.
They were 6-7, and they should have won 4 games last year. They lost them in the last second. Should have even beaten Georgia. And they were 6-7 last year. I'm just saying they were 4 plays away from 10 wins last year.
But here's what Missouri is, and
Tennessee has to visit them.
As long as Eli Drinkwitz is there, here's what Missouri is and will always be. It will be a house built on a sand foundation. He didn't even have an offensive coordinator before this year. He essentially did it all himself, which, whether it's title or not, that you're just not going to go out and get a good, innovative mind that doesn't get that title. Titles are important to coaches. It helps you move up the ladder. So whether or not Josh Heupel is the offensive coordinator, at least he's named an offensive coordinator, right? But by not naming one, you basically undermined your ability to go out and get one. You're a me guy. Eli Drinkwitz isn't going to do anything in Missouri. Now that the East is better.
But
that's where I'm going.
So, but typically, historically, if a team loses a lot of games that are very, very close and returns a lot of talent, they get over the hump and start winning those games the next year. So,
I'm just
saying they should have gone 10-2 last year.
I think Eli Drinkwitz is a bad coach, and I think it's a poor foundation.
I'm mostly with you. I just want to point out those things that, I didn't think about it until I saw it, how close they were in so many of their losses. It's the reverse of Phil Steele, who never lets us forget this. If Phil Steele reminds you of anything to his dying wish, he will be the one to say, I predicted Tennessee's 2005 disaster before anybody else did. That's what he says in every magazine, that he always goes back to, hey, guys, don't forget I was the one who picked them to have a losing record in 2005. Or to be
Not that he would ever go back and reference himself. You've got to be talking about somebody else.